saying that says if you don't know where you've been and don't know where you are, it's practically impossible to know where you're going. And I think that story or that expression kind of relates to history, its significance and its importance. Well, today, we're going to kind of delve into where we have been and something that happened in the past that kind of reflects on where we are now, and it serves to educate us on where we've been and maybe the direction we need to go moving toward the future. So we're dealing from a historical perspective today for reasons that are very important. First of all, I'm sure that all of us, or most of us, are familiar with the fact that there have been quite a few questions as it relates to the value and the importance of history, particularly African American or Black history. And I think it's incumbent upon us, those of us who realize the importance of history and who understand the role that it helps in the development and the improvement of our race, need to be conscientious about that and how important that is as it relates to our future, our children's future, and their children's future. So today, we have a real live descendant of someone who played a mighty important role for a lot of reasons in the advancement, the development, the progress and the history of our people, because we have a real live relative, descendant, William and Ellen Craft. And then I want to, and then we got Miss Julia Craft Davis.
Julia Ellen
Craft Davis. Thank you. Who is the great granddaughter of that couple. But we're going to start with, rather than asking Miss Julia to tell the story, we also have with us Dr. Thomas Duval, and I call him a history enthusiast. And, it's kind of proper that we're having this discussion today because as a community, we are celebrating the bicentennial, 200 years of the existence, well, not the total existence, but 200 years of Macon's existence in this area, because the Muskogee Creek were here 17,000 years before we arrived. But we're going to talk about those 200 years, and as a part of that discussion, we want to include, everything that happened. And William and Ellen Craft Davis were a part of our community. And then, so Doc, just very quickly tell that story.
Well, the story of Ellen and William Craft, I think, is an American story because it started, of course, in the antebellum South. And Ellen was from Clinton, Georgia, and she was given as a gift. See, a lot of kids don't realize that slaves were property. So she was given as a gift to the daughter of the Smiths as a marriage present to the Collins family. So she came to Macon basically as a slave in the Dr. Collins house, and eventually she fell in love with William Craft, who was a carpenter, and they contrived a plan to escape from slavery because Ellen did not want to have her children born in slavery and run the risk of having her children taken away. That's the old expression, you take the children and sell them downriver and so forth. Yep. Because again, the children were considered property. And so she was fair-skinned like I am, and she contrived this plan with her husband to dress up like a plantation owner and to feign being that owner and to have her husband be the slave and to have the audacity to get on a train and go to Savannah and then to get a steamer to Charleston and make it all the way to Philadelphia. And of course, Miss Julia Ellencraft can give us a whole lot more detail. But for us, I think the thing we should really get out of this story is that this was the greatest escape of slavery in that era, 1848, in the Western world. It was known literally all over the world in that era. And the sad thing today is our children virtually know nothing about it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That's a good segue into Miss Julia Ellen Craft Davis, who is the great-great-granddaughter of that couple who pulled off that miraculous escape. And so I want to thank you and congratulate you for thinking it would not be robbery for this story to be told, and the importance and the relevance of that story to our people and our history. And I understand that there is even a book and that you've been using whenever you get the opportunity to tell that story. So talk a little bit about that, and talk a little bit about your family too. And you know, when you learned that you had such phenomenal great-great-grandparents. So just talk a little bit about yourself, and also include this story that you're going around telling as it relates to your great-great-grandparents.
Yes, I was named after my grandmother. So I'm Julia Ellen Craft Davis, and my grandmother was Julia Ellen Craft DeCosta. And we were both named after Ellen Craft. And my grandmother wanted to be sure that her grandchildren, she had 4 of us, and she wanted to make sure that we all knew the story, because it was something that she had heard in her family, and just it's been passed down for generations. And so my grandmother was very happy when the book that the Crafts wrote in 1860, when it was printed in New York and told the story, so that then we could have a copy to read, because the book that was written in 1860 was not readily available. It was it wasn't so available, as far as I know, in the U.S. It was something that you had to find in London, but it was not easy to find here. So it was really wonderful that we were given that copy, and so then we then passed it on to our children. So now I have grandchildren, and they have, one of them is now named William Craft.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
then he has a different surname, of course, but yeah, so my grandchildren are all saying, well, how come you didn't include that in my name? So it's we're passing the story on to our grandchildren, and they really they're very happy to learn about their ancestors, even though they're like 7, 9, and 11.
Yeah.
So the the story has been told. Each generation has been trying to make sure that story stays alive, and so we have there are a couple of movies coming out that will tell the story, and we're just excited about it being continued, the legacy being continued and followed. Yeah. So tell me what.
Yeah. Well, that's very important, and that's good. You know, I mean, that's such a warm expression, and it gives such a good feeling, because it's so important to our community, both from a family and a historical perspective, is to teach our children and our offspring. You know, that's what has happened. You know, historically, let's go back to the civil rights era. You know, historically, you know, there have been just literally thousands of African Americans who did very well, who have done well, you know, since after the crash. But somehow, you know, in the last 30, 40, 50 years, that has kind of been lost. So I think it's important, you know, and it's such an honor, you know, not only to sit here with you, but to hear you tell the story of the kind of concern that your family is having as it relates to continuing the legacy. So what we're going to do, I'm going to let you get back to your book, but since we're talking about how the importance of our history is lost, you know, we want to let Dr. Duval talk about the role that he's playing and his efforts to keep the history of black people alive. You know, I mean, it's hard to believe, but their efforts to thwart, T-H-W-A-R-T, thwart it. You know, and then so it's going to take initiatives like the story of William and Ella Craft in a movie and in books. It's also going to take a coloring book, you know, to kind of pass that story on. Doc?
Well, one of the things I've developed is the Macon, Middle Georgia African American coloring book. Because what you have to do is you have to motivate children here in their heart so you can motivate them in their mind. The other thing you have to do is find engaging ways to connect with kids. And for little kids, you know, coloring is a way to do it. And of course, I have the Ellen and William Craft story in the book, and I also have images in the book for the kids to use to color. Because we also know that African American kids, especially the boys, are right brain learners. So they need to be engaged and active in their learning. Unfortunately, our education system is a left brain learning environment. So that's the mismatch there. The other important thing for me is simply this, and this is where I really think our system needs to do better. We have to motivate our children to want to learn. You know, just not motivate them to learn, because you and I, we were motivated by that paddle, if you remember. You know, that's one way of motivation. But I'm saying you need to motivate them to want to learn, and we need to use this history and culture so they can see their image in the things, in the materials and activities that they're doing, to be engaged and motivated to want to learn. And of course, one way of doing them is to tell their rich, factual, truthful history of who they are. Because the sad thing is, our children are growing up thinking basically that they are that gang tattoo sign. That's their total identity. But this is their real identity. And if we want them to appreciate the opportunity for public health education, we got to give them that foundation. And this story is an example of the foundation that they need to know and understand. Because once they got away, what did they do? They got educated. They put their emphasis in education. And if we don't lay that foundation, then they will take everything for granted. And I think that's one of the problems we have, you know, in our system today, is they don't have that foundation to appreciate that opportunity. But that story, her family story, it has a rich education piece that is continuing today.
Okay. Ms. Davis, talk a little bit about the book and talk a little bit about not only that book, but other kinds of literature and initiatives and the movie making that are going on, and, you know, as it relates to keeping that story alive, and talk about what you individually have been doing, including, you know, going to school and what have you, enlightening young people about your family story.
Well, what's really interesting is that not only did we have the book written by the Crafts, but we also have books written by other people based on their story, and it's for children to read. And this is a book that that's called Ellen Craft's Escape from Slavery. And I have another 2 books too, but they're also for children. This is great because at the very back of it, it has a script that you can then use for a group of children to then act it out. And then the other book that I have is also like a comic book series, but it's got the story in there about the crafts. So it's really, it's great to have books that are not just for adults, but also for children that tell the story. We went to a couple of schools, one today and another one yesterday. And I read, I kind of told the story, because one was today was in 8th grade, and then one yesterday was, I think, was it elementary, kindergarten?
Yeah.
I think it was kindergarten class. And so I had to tell that story. But it was wonderful to have the children in the 8th grade. They knew so much. They already knew about the fugitive slave law that was passed. They knew, really, it was surprising how much they did know that they were learning in their social studies class.
Wow.
So that was encouraging. But this book, and there are other books, another one that just came out with Dr. Elon Wu, that she just published a book in the past couple of weeks. It was number 7 on the New York Times bestsellers list, and the story is about the crafts, but it's not a fiction. She's actually taken the facts and told the information that she has been able to research about the crafts. It's over 300 some pages long, and it's based on what she has found in her research, and she's also included research from other people. And it includes information about William Craft and his family, and about his previous owner, Hugh Craft. It talks a lot about not just William, but also about Ellen. It's amazing the detail that she's gone into with that. And there's a discussion about that on TV tonight that's going to be about that. The New York Times is streamlining it. But basically, another book, there are lots of books that have been written. So another one that's really good is The Black Foremothers by Dorothy Sterling. But there's so many other books. But this one is great because it does give a timeline for life and what the Crafts did go through. But there's so many books that have been written about them, and the latest one is the one by Dr. Wu.
Okay, so what does your activity entail? I know that we brought you here, and thanks for coming, and welcome. Welcome to, well, I can't tell you, totally welcome to Macon, because you got roots here. Because I don't know, did you mention that they were from Macon? I think you did.
Oh yeah, and last night I said, welcome back home.
Yeah, welcome back home, which would be the right expression for you. But, I mean, so are you totally engaged in just telling this story and going around the country, making people aware of your grandparents and how great they were?
When I'm invited, I try to come. It's something that I'm happy to share about the story, and I was really and my family is learning it more now too. So we've got more than just me, but it's really we got this from our grandmother's. I guess my grandmother has a niece, and she started this off years ago about making sure we tell the story. And we don't want this to end because it's an amazing story.
It is.
And it's a story that more people should know. However, a lot of professors in the college, at the university level, have been very active in telling the story to their students at the university level in the African American Studies department. So that's important to know. Also, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Their people, many of them are professors at universities across the country. They know it, and they also share it. So it's not a secret, but it's not as well known as it should be, and it's going to become even more so known as more comes out in the near future. The International African American Museum, which is going to be opening up sometime in this year, 2023. They are going to have section about the crafts in there. And even when you go to the Smithsonian, there is something there on the crafts. So it's something you can, if you want to learn about it, it's there. What I did most recently was go to the B&O Museum it's in Baltimore, and they got a grant, and they were able to tell, through a short film, they were able to talk about the history of the crafts as well as box brown. But they showed the route that the crafts took on the B&O Railroad.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's becoming more and more, common to find information about the crafts.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was such a well-known story back in the day. And what's really wonderful is that, the Ellen and William Craft had 5 grown children. And what's really amazing is that one of their children, the Crafts came to the country, and they brought their children because they were all born in England except for one. And what's really, what I find amazing is that the one went back, and his descendants are alive. Well, his descendants are alive living in England, in London. And we were able to go and have a reunion of some of them.
Wow.
And then when they had there was an English Heritage that gave out a circular plaque, a blue plaque that they put on homes or places where people, well-known people, they are recognized. And they did that for Ellen and Wayne Craft on the home that they lived in Hammersmith, England, which is really like a part of London. And so when it was first installed, I was able to go over there.
Wow.
And actually meet our British cousins. But our family kept in touch with the descendants of the British, and so we know them. They're not like unknown. They're not strangers to us. So we know our British cousins, and they are researching just like we're researching, or I'm researching here. They're researching over there what they can find out about the crafts.
Wow. Now you said that they, in fact, that's interesting because one key point is that, so they moved to England. William and Ellen moved to England.
That's right.
They left the United States and moved to England.
That's the only place they were safe.
Yeah, I understand that.
They weren't safe even in Boston.
Yeah, I understand that. Now, did they ever come back as a couple to the United States?
Yeah, yes, Ellen and William Craft came to America, and this is where, and they brought their children with them.
Wow.
Their children were born in England, and they brought them to America.
Wow.
Yeah, so basically but one of them went back and stayed, and his descendants are the ones that know.
Well, that's very good. So, in moving around, now you did mention a movie. Is this going to be just a clip, or is it a full-fledged movie that's going to come out?
Well, more will probably be announced, but I know that there is a film that my cousin is involved with, and that's in progress. And
Okay.
the other one was also announced. So there'll be more. You'll hear more about it.
Right. So what about you? Now, you did say that they published a book, was it 1868 or?
It was about 1860.
Okay,
that
1860.
William wrote.
To tell their story?
Yes, they
Wow.
told the story, and it's been reprinted. You can get it online now if you have an interest. If people want to read it.
Okay, and well, you can. I guess you could Google it and just put William Craft book in there.
It's Running 1,000 Miles to Freedom. By
Running
William
1,000. I was going to ask you the title of it.
Yeah.
Running 1,000 Miles to Freedom, which is very, very good, and I really, really appreciate it. Well, let me say this in closing. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you for keeping the story alive, and it's more important now than ever.
Yes.
And trying to get this story told and to let young people know, to let our people know that, and this helps to motivate, as Dr. Duval said, if you know you're about something, if you know you're worth something, and if you know you come from something, then you want to be something.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, ma'am.
The crafts emphasized education. they wanted they wanted to learn how to read and write. They did that. But then they also wanted their children. And so even their grandchildren. For generations, our family has made education an important piece. So they not only finished high school, they went on to college. And some of them did really, really well. So my grandmother's brother went to Harvard. My grandmother went to Howard University finished in 1919. And then she had a brother who did die when he was young, I guess 21, but he went to Morehouse.
Wow.
Yeah, but there are others who went to really wonderful schools. Education was important. It didn't have to be the best college, but they did go to some of the best colleges.
Right,
and it was just wonderful to see it being passed on to others.
That's something. Well, I'm so thankful and so proud of you and so appreciative of you putting that education plug in there.
Yeah.
Because that ties right on the end of what I'm going to say to Dr. Duval, which is thank you, Doc.
Yeah.
Thank you for the interest that you're taking in history. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your participation in the bicentennial and putting together a lecture series. And you can go to macon200.com to learn more about that. Thank you for coming back home, to tell a story that needs to be told. Mm-hmm. And we hope that it just embraces and pricks the conscientiousness of the entire community. This is a call to action. I'm your host, Alex Habersham, having interviewed Miss Julia Ellen Craft Davis, a descendant of William and Ellen Craft, who escaped from slavery back in 1848. Mm-hmm. In 1848, and that's a real story that everybody needs to know that cannot be told too many times. And Dr. Thomas Duval, you don't know it, but he's really a dentist, but he's more of a historian now since he retired from dentistry.
Right.
And thank you for the role that you're playing, Doc.
Thank you.
I really appreciate both of you. And it kind of warms my heart to at least know that we got efforts going on in our community to embrace our history and emphasize the importance of it. I want to give a special shout out to Andrea and Trace Crum, who are our producers and our videographers, because they are history buffs too, and they play a major role in our recording all of the shows that will be a part of history for generations to come. I'm your host, Alex Habersham. Have a great day.
www.makingblackpages.com.
Think Black Pages first.
You better think
Black Pages.
When purchasing goods like beauty supplies, cell phones, clothing, and food, think Black Pages first. For services like cleaning, event planning, and healthcare, search, shop, support.
The Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages.
Community for attorneys, auto, barbers, books, catering, churches, DJs, insurance, venues, and more.
Over 1,600 African-American businesses listed.
Serving Baldwin, Bibb, Crawford, Houston, Jones, Monroe, Peach, Twiggs,
and
Wilkinson counties. When you spend money in your community, you are supporting the advancement of your community.
Our motto is,
have you hugged a black business today? Well, here's your chance with the new 2022-2023 edition
of the Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages.
So think Black Pages first. Available in hard copy and
digital.
Get your copy today. Think Black Pages first.